Vanguard is the gift that keeps on giving, because even now we still have so many more things to talk about as Bushiroad reveals even more stuff for Vanguard and Vanguard Zero.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another episode of Cardfight Update. A couple of hours ago we already did a Cardfight update for the product livestream that was held this morning or this evening, depending on where you are in the world. And in that video we talked about all the new reveals for the upcoming sets this next coming months, as well as the big reveals for Vanguard Zero, where they're going into the Link Joker arc, as well as the news about the new manga and the new anime that will start airing in 2021 and everything in between. But now we also have the live stream where they're revealing new cards like Nightrose for Butterfly Under the Moonlight and some extra information for the upcoming VBT12 set with Gabriel as well as Gurgit. And they elaborated a little bit more on Vanguard Zero, as they also revealed a couple of cards for Genesis, and they also talked about an interesting update for the Soul Blast as well as Perfect Guard mechanic in Vanguard Zero. So without further ado, let's jump right into the news, as there's a lot to unravel and unpack. And we're gonna jump straight into the physical card game TCG news, and we're gonna start off with VBT12, as we got a little bit more information for that set, as they now finally have given this set a name, as the set is going to be named Radiant Divine Lightning. And with that they also revealed this image, where they also gave us insight in the rarity split department, which gives us a good hint at they're gonna be an inclusion of ASR, so another secret wares, as well as a couple of SPs, which are basically SP clan packs. But another thing about this is that this set contains a marker card, and this time I'm not misreading it. It is marker card and not a token card. So the question is this marker card basically a reprint version of the Astral Plane, because Genesis is going to get support as well as the Astral Poet is going to get support? So is that just a reprint of that card, or is this something new? We don't know. That's just speculation, but we will get the information when time's due. Now, another extra news about this set is that they introduced two new artworks for two cards, which haven't been revealed so far, because the only artworks that we saw were for the 5 new VRs for the set, which were of course Gabriel, Gurgit, the new Vanquisher, Vanguard, as well as a new Genesis VR, which has been confirmed to be an Astral Poet. So it's probably a grade 3 that isn't a new type of Valkyrian. So sadly, the idea of a potential new Astral deity is probably off the tables, but who knows, maybe they changed something here. But the two new units that have been confirmed for this set are Nociel and Dragonic Descendant. And interesting enough, this is the Stride fusion of Love Sniper Nociel, aka the Grade 3 Nociel. So this is going to be very interesting in what they're going to do. Does this also mean we're going to get the return of the Grade 2 as well as the Grade 3 Nociel, or only the Grade 2 and this will be the substitute for the Grade 3 spot? We don't know so far, but it's really interesting that they're actually bringing back Nociel, which was a really small archetype, but a very fan favorite archetype. So I'm curious of what the playstyle is going to be, and if it's anywhere near what it used to be. And with Dragonic Descendant, it's very likely that Eradicators might also be in this set, or it's just a one-off card, and with its thing being restanding, it's very likely that this card either restands as a rearguard or restands as a vanguard. Now on top of that, they also revealed the units that are going to get the ASR treatment, so the high special rare cards, and that's are going to be Dragonic Descendant for Narukami and Valkyrian for Genesis. So very interesting picks for these cards. I mean, Valkyrian, I don't know if we needed another high rarity card of this, because we already had a couple of versions of Valkyrian. But it's interesting enough that they chose Descendant, which is also using its OG artwork from way back, which incidentally is now also being introduced in Vanguard Zero, which is actually pretty funny. The final new addition about this set, which I confirmed, is that this set will also have a reprint of Mighty Bolt Dragoon, aka the Great Free Searcher for Narukami, and it's gonna contain 4 copies per case. So that's nice for anybody that wants to get into Narukami, didn't have the time to get the copies once they got the support like beginning of this year. And it makes sense because all the other clans in this set are going to get their first Grade 3 Searcher, so Narcon would then be left behind. And now with the reprint, not the case. So it's similar to what we've seen with Luard, with Renwin, as well as with Tavis, with their Grade 3 Searcher, as that is pretty neat. Now that was the last information that we got for VBT12 Radiant Divine Lightning. But that means we are going to get into the new cards reveal for Granblue for Butterfly Under the Moonlight. And we knew that Nightrose is coming today. But before we go into Nightrose, let's talk about a brand new Double R Grade 2 that is Thin Mist Banshee. And this is a completely brand new card, and her abilities are Auto and Vanguard Circle. When placed by a card's ability, this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So if she's going to be superior called, that's 19k. What's interesting about this card is that it needs to be superior called via a skill. This is actually pretty easy to do, and even if you could have this card in your hand, because as I explained during the Cardfight update where we talked about where they possibly broken Granblue, is that we now have Necro Bone. And Necro Bone allows you to superior call any card from the drop zone, but you discard first. So that means if this card is in your hand, you can discard it and then bring it back to the field. So you can give her the 19k power very easily. You only need to set up your drop zone a bit before you can activate Necrobone by calling this grade 2, but it's a thing to think about. Now the other ability about this card is Auto. When retired from the Vanguard Circle, by your card's ability, draw a card. This ability may only be used by a card with the same card name once per turn. So this is an interesting effect because it means it needs to be retired by a different skill in order to attain the draw effect. Now that in itself already gives us a hint to what Nightrose is going to do, because so far no other Granblue card in Standard forces you to actually retire a card that easily. I believe there's maybe 1 or 2 cards that I'm forgetting that actually force you to retire a card, but it isn't really something that Standard Granblue does. If we look at this card as a whole, this card's actually quite awkward, or at least not that amazing, because we have a card named Ghost Ship. And Ghost Ship is basically a card that cannot be called from hand to the Guardian Circle or Vanguard Circle, but you need to be superior calling from a drop zone. And then when you attack with it, it gains 15k power, and at the end of the battle, it retires itself and you draw a card. So it basically does the same thing as this card, but it gets even more power because it gets plus 15k, and it can just draw its cards, and it isn't restricted by the drawing effect that can only happen once per turn, because this has the hard once per turn clause like we've seen on the main. So the only upside to this card to Ghost Ship is that you can just call this card from your hand, no problem, and you can call it to the Guardian Circle from your hand, no problem. So I'm not so sure what the actual use out of this card is while we have Ghost Ship, but that said, maybe Ghost Ship is going to be very expensive, so this could be a good budget alternative option if you don't have the money to invest in 4 copies of Ghost Ship. But it's an interesting addition. Maybe this becomes a more vital key card with some other cards that have yet to be revealed for this set that makes it a lot better than Ghost Ship, but for us, how I see it, is basically a more restrictive, weaker version of Ghost Ship, and you're better off just running Ghost Ship. But you can say, well, this card stays on the board and Ghost Ship will always be retired. Well, not if we're going to take a look at the new Nightrose. Because today we of course got a reveal of the new VR for Granblue, which is Vampire Princess of Nightfog, Nightrose. And her abilities are Auto and Vanguard Circle. When your rearguard attacks or boost, that unit gets power plus 5k until the end of the battle, and retire that unit at the end of that battle. So this is what I meant with you're better off running Ghost Ship. Because even, yes, the other grade 2 can stay on the board, but not if you have Nightrose as your Vanguard, because you're forcing your rearguards to get the power and then retire it. Nightrose basically allows you to pump up power numbers on your board very easily, because your columns get an additional 10k power. Your attacker gets plus 5k power, and your booster gets plus 5k power. Meaning you start to hit really hard even without Ghost Ships and even without Skull Dragons, which is actually pretty nice, because besides those cards, most cards in Granblue tend to lack in actual pressure or value power, so you're really dependent on those specific cards to do in the work for you in terms of your rearguard pressure. Then Nightrose's second ability, and this is something that a lot of people have been speculating, is Auto and Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, costs countable as 1, choose a column, call up to 2 cards from your drop zone to the Vanguard Circle in that column, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of the battle. So Nightrose allows you to multi-attack mid-battle. And that's actually pretty good because that allows you to be a bit more aggressive, and that works in tandem with her first ability that powers everything up. And because you're starting to automatically retire everything, that column opens up, so you don't have to call on top of other units because there are no units in that column. And if it's in the mid to late game, your opponent's sitting on grade 3, meaning your Nightrose will hit for 22k on its own, which is actually pretty good because that means you can hit easily over force numbers, and even if they get a defensive trigger, your booster is going to be quite big because that booster will also have an additional plus 5k power. So there's a lot of pressure and a lot of power that Nightrose can dish out. And interesting enough, this synergizes really nicely with what we've been speculating with the reveal of Colombard. Because now you can superior call Colombard from the drop zone with Nightrose skill, and then use Colombard skill to mill something like a Skull Dragon to immediately call that to the field to bash out for big power plays. But in the case that Skull Dragon isn't really that strong because your drop zone might not be good with good targets or not filled plenty enough, so its power level isn't really that high, you can go for the King Tentacle play that I explained in the previous video, where you just mill King Tentacle, superior call grade 1 in the back row behind where you're going to call King Tentacle, and then use King Tentacle Soul Blast skill to superior call it immediately itself, becoming a 22k attacker with a booster, which can actually hit for potentially over 40k. And that can be much higher than what Skull Dragon is in some scenarios where your drop zone isn't filled with enough cards. Because for Skull Dragon to hit over something like 45k, you probably need around 20 cards in your drop zone to actually make that count. So in the case you're not hitting that number, going for the King Tentacle play might actually be better. Now I'm gonna be very honest, Nightrose herself isn't that super strong. It's very reliant on her key pieces like Colombard, for example, as well as Necrobone to actually allow you to do a lot of stuff. And Nightrose herself doesn't fill the drop zone with cards. It isn't something like Cocytus that just mills an insane amount of cards and allow you to do all your wacky plays. So your setup will take actually some time. You need to correct cards to actually do that. And even then, Nightrose doesn't really give you a lot of value or a lot of pluses because it forcefully retires your entire board. So if you attack or you boost, you're forced to give them the power and you're forced to remove them from the field. Meaning you start to use a lot of cards from your hand to actually replenish your field to keep on the onslaught against your opponent. Meaning the general value engine of Granblue that you can just superior call cards from the drop zone, and that so you can keep your cards in your hand safe and only use them for guarding. That's a bit of the table with this Nightrose, making this build probably a lot more glass cannony than just your regular Granblue deck. But this could all change with some extra reveals, because I believe Necro Lazy has yet to be revealed, and we probably have some cards in the lower rarity slots that can turn this around. It can make Nightrose insane, but so far as it looks now, it's a nice multi-tech engine that has some plays, but it's probably a little bit less consistent than your typical Granblue build that can just mill an insane amount of cards and just builds a board and allows you to wall up with a lot of cards without dedicating them to the field. Now, what is very interesting is that this card works pretty nicely in Premium with something like Bad Bounty that can restand into this card, and because Premium has a lot of things like Hollow and just wants to clear out the board anyways against other control clans or maybe against Link Joker with locking, then just forcefully retiring these cards doesn't really matter all that much, and you actually can get more value out of them. And of course, keep in mind, it depends on your playstyle. If you rely on Ghost Ships and your Skull Dragon, then being forced to retire them and giving them a little bit extra power, you don't actually mind, because those cards will just retire themselves anyways. So in that sense, you're not actually minusing yourself a lot as long as you rely on those specific cards for your offensive plays. And that basically wraps it up for the physical card game in terms of card reveals and news for the upcoming sets in this particular season. Now with that, let's jump straight into the Vanguard Zero news, as we also got some cards revealed for the upcoming Genesis clan. As I explained in the previous video, Genesis is going to be introduced in a brand new set for Vanguard Zero with the Link Joker art, and Bushiroad has revealed a couple of cards for this clan that are very interesting, that works around Himiko and the Artemis right chain. So, of course, a right chain needs a new starter, and we got the Artemis right chain starter, which has the typical right chain skill, which when it's written by the grade 1 of the Artemis right chain, you can search us for the grade 2 or grade 3. If you do not catch them in the top 7, you can call her to the field, or if you ride on top of her, then you can call her to the field as well. So those two skills are very typical of a right chain, so you probably are very aware of this. Now we also got the grade 1 of the right chain, which has the skill Continuous Vanguard Circle. If your soul has the grade 0 Artemis, aka the starter, this unit gets plus 1k, so it becomes an 18k, so it becomes an 8k body, which is typical of a right chain, and it also has the skill Auto Vanguard Circle. When a grade 2 other than your grade 2 Artemis rides on top of it, check top 7 and fix your ride. So basically you check top 7 for this grade 2 and then just ride it to make your ride chain what you want it to be. So it's even more consistency option, which is actually pretty nice. And because you fix it, you actually put another card in your soul, which is pretty good for Genesis, which want to fill out your soul quite rapidly. Now we also have the grade 2 of the Artemis right chain, which has the skill Continuous Vanguard Circle. If your soul has the grade 1 Artemis, it gets plus 1k power, so it becomes a 10k base, very typical. And it also has the skill Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, hits a Vanguard, soul charge 2, then if your soul has the grade 1 Artemis, soul charge 2 more. That's really good, because again, in Vanguard Zero, you can force out unhit effects. And that means you can easily get 2 extra soul, and in some cases even 4 soul, which can set you up for your late game plays, that you're going to see in a second what this deck actually wants to do. Now from the grade 2 Artemis, we also have the grade 3 Artemis, which has the following skills: Auto Vanguard Circle, Limit Break 4, when it attacks a Vanguard, Soul Blast free to draw 2 cards, put a card from your hand into the soul, then get plus 5k for the battle. Also act on Vanguard Circle, Persona Blast, look at top 5 and add 1 to hand, rest on the bottom of the deck. And the final skill is Continuous Vanguard Circle. If your soul has the grade 2 Artemis, this unit gets plus 1k. So if you have the right chain, it becomes 11k attacker, and it can Persona Blast herself to basically get any card in the top 5. So you can search for your PGs, you can search for your grade 2s if you need them, you can search them out for a specific grade 1 if you need a specific booster or a specific key card, which is actually pretty good. But then her Limit Break 4 skill is where the actual value lies. It allows you to draw 2 and put any card from your hand into the soul, and also a bit power. That draw 2 and put anything into your soul is pretty good, because you can get to your grade 2s, you can get to your PGs and just put a grade 3 or something that you don't need into the soul, and you don't really mind that, because in Zero, overall card advantage isn't that important in the physical card game, because you cannot guard with grade 1s or grade 3s, unlike you can do in the actual game. So that's actually pretty good, as it allows you to get to your pieces. But it becomes even better, as you're gonna see in a second. Now the second grade 3 that has been revealed is Himiko. And Himiko is the first break ride unit that we've seen in Vanguard Zero. Because Himiko's skills are Auto and Vanguard Circle, Limit Break 4. When you ride over this unit, aka break ride, until the end of turn, your Vanguard gets plus 10k power, 2 of your rearguards gets plus 5k power, and your Vanguard gets the following effect: Vanguard Circle, when it attacks a Vanguard, Soul Blast free, draw 2 cards, put a card from your hand into your soul. So that skill that you give away is the exact same skill that Artemis already has. So the idea is basically ride her, gain the Limit Break 4 ability, so you have 4 damage, then break ride on top of her with Artemis, and now Artemis has the same skill twice. So on attack, you can Soul Blast free, draw 2, put a card into your hand, and then again Soul Blast free, draw 2, put a card into your hand, and give your Vanguard plus 5k power. That, with the extra 10k, is plus 15 on your Vanguard, plus 5 on your rearguards. You just draw an immense amount of cards, and you put specific cards into your soul. Now before we go to the following card, which makes this pretty insane, Himiko also has the following ability: Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks a Vanguard, Soul Charge 1 and plus 1k for the battle. So it basically becomes a 12k beater, and it always fills your soul with extra cards, which is always pretty good, as it fuels those soul blasting skills. Allowing you to soul blast 6 cards, or twice soul blast free, draw 2 and then put a card into your soul, allows you to set up for this new grade 2, which will become really good. Because Genesis has this grade 2 with the skill Auto in Soul. During your turn, when this card is put into the drop zone, counterblast 1, call this to the rearguard circle, and it gets plus 3k for the turn. So when you Soul Blast this card, you can call it to the field and it becomes a 12k attacker. This is pretty insane because if you break right, that means your front row gets an additional 5k. So whatever's in the front row can hit anything on its own, so you don't have to boost. So you can hit either in interceptors or in your opponent's Vanguard or whatever. You just attack and then you attack with the Vanguard and use those skills to Soul Blast 3 cards. Then put a card into the soul, and if you Soul Blast this new card, you can then call it to the field in front of one of your standing boosters. Then you can use the skill again to Soul Blast 3 cards and put another card in the soul. Now the thing is, if you have 2 copies of this in your soul, you can just do it immediately and fill out your new front row and have 2 more standing attacks that are 12k, and with an extra booster will probably be even higher. But if you have this card in your hand, you can actually put one into the hand with the first Soul Blast 3 skill to set up for your second Soul Blast 3 skill to then Soul Blast it and then call it to the field. This is how the break right and having Himiko skill double on one unit, it becomes really powerful in combination with this card. And so, as far as I'm aware, this grade 2 didn't exist in the actual physical card game because I cannot remember this card at all. And this skill makes this Himiko and Artemis deck looks incredible powerful, and I think it's gonna be really, really interesting to see how powerful this is going to be, as this is just the first couple of cards that we've got revealed to us, so who knows how good Genesis is going to be. Now another thing that they revealed to us is of course the PG for Genesis, which is Kushinada. But with that, they also revealed a change to the Perfect Guard and Soul Blast mechanic. Because as you already seen, Genesis is going to Soul Blast a lot and Soul Charge a lot, but we want to have the Artemis cards into the Soul for the extra power. So that can screw up if we accidentally Soul Blast those. So Bushiroad will introduce the automatically and manually function of Soul Blasting. So now you can choose which cards will be Soul Blasted and not. This is a major upgrade for specific decks like Pale Moon and Genesis, which rely on the Soul, because you can now finally choose which cards are going to be Soul Blasted. And you can now up this option in your menu by saying I want automatically Soul Blasted or I want manual Soul Blasting, which is actually pretty fine if you play a specific clan or deck that doesn't really care about what card is going to be Soul Blasted. So by just having automatic Soul Blasting means your plays will be that much faster, which is actually a nice addition to include that in specific builds and just give people the option to put that in or put that out. Now the second change that they introduced is how Perfect Guards work, because Perfect Guards right now will activate if your opponent hits you with a crit, and you will either go to 5 damage or 6 damage. And also, even if your opponent doesn't come with a crit, but it will deal you the 6 damage, it will automatically activate the PG. Now, with Kushinada revealed, they also explained that PGs no longer will activate if your opponent has a crit and puts you to 5 with the damage. This allows players that rely on limit break 4 skills or break right to actually get those skills off on a more consistent basis. This is basically also a nerf to MLB and something like Perfect Riser, because no longer can you put those decks on free damage, rip all their PGs from their hand, and then proceed to kill them once all those PGs are gone. Now the question arises, is this change only for Kushinada and specific new PGs that will come out during the Link Joker era, or is this something they are going to implement for all the PGs all across the board? That is something that hasn't really been answered so far as I'm aware, but I personally believe that this is going to be a change to the game as a whole. So this is how they're going to change PG's inner workings to just make it a little bit more accessible at certain degrees. And in that change, if that's going to be widespread, will potentially make critical triggers a bit better. Because the problem with critical triggers nowadays is that if you hit a crit early on and they have a PG and you maybe hit double crit and you would put them to 5 damage, all those pressure, all those values of the triggers are immediately gone because it just automatically PG'd and negated all those crits. So either way, I think it's a really interesting change. The Soul Blasting change is huge, as it allows you to do way more interesting plays with specific decks that relies on Soul, want to have specific cards in the Soul. I only hope that they will introduce this mechanic for counterblasting, because I really want to have the option to actually counterblast what I want to counterblast, especially in something like a clan like Angel Feathers. So I hope they're gonna incorporate this manual Soul Blasting idea also for counterblasting somewhere down the road, as it definitely will increase the skill ceiling of something like Vanguard Zero with specific decks that rely on cards and damage on and whatnot. And with that we conclude all the news today. There was a lot to go over, even with the news dump that we got this morning with the separate video. Even now we still got a lot of information. We got extra information concerning VBT 12, as well as the new Nightrose cards and the cards for Granblue in general, but also the card dump of Genesis for Vanguard Zero, as well as the change to Soul Blasting and the Perfect Guards are really interesting, and I'm curious of how far they're going to take it to other aspects of Vanguard, because there is a lot of room to improve in Vanguard Zero, and I'm curious of where they're going to go next. But with that said, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of the new Nightrose, as well as the new Grade 2, the new news regarding VBT 12, and of course everything for Vanguard Zero. As always, this video has been brought to you by lovely patrons over at patreon.com. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply do that by going over to patreon.com/Vanguard Insider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.